No more electric bill. They are paying us.
And we don't have to worry about the grid going down.
Welcome to Life in 2046. Today we are talking about electric autonomy beyond the grid. There's a variety of reasons why people are considering being completely independent from the electrical grid system. Is it even possible to consider realistically living off the grid? Certainly, yes, today. You can have solar panels that will generate the electricity necessary to operate your home or business. Then people will say, well, what about when it's dark outside? You can look at the lithium iron phosphate batteries in the so called power walls, which allow you to store energy during the daytime to operate completely through the night. And should you have any further issues, backup natural gas generators can provide backup for your batteries. Next thing to consider is there's a lot of issues with the lithium ion batteries, but there's a lot of progress being made now in sand batteries. Yes, I said sand, like on a beach, and it's very promising, and there are some examples of these batteries in operation at the moment. This very complicated graph shows how it could operate. The upper part shows centralized generation, which is what we have right now. How large power plants use high voltage transmission capabilities to provide grid power to homes and businesses. In the upper right hand corner, the centralized power chart showing it goes down says that homes, and we can include small businesses in that, will continue to decline in their usage of power from this source. What you will begin to see is this 20-year transition where not just houses and businesses providing for their own use, but will share in small local distributed energy resource management systems, share the electricity with others, and be able to back each other up and provide for the power needs in a much more cost effective basis. How all this plays out is shown here in the rate spread. On a per unit basis, home solar efficiency locks in an operational cost that's less than half of the current national grid average. And how it compares is that the solar cost is primarily a one time expense. And so, with the fixed solar rate, over time, it becomes a much more cost effective approach. The lifetime gap is the spending gap between the upfront investment cost and the total cost of this type of electrical generation. To put it another way, over the cost of the system, your levelized cost per kilowatt hour using grid power is approximately 17 and one half cents per kilowatt hour, whereas using home solar power, it is approximately 7 cents. Looking at that over a 25-year cumulative outlay, the grid power for your typically sized home is about $115,000 versus $37,500 for your home solar generation system. Besides cost, another major issue for people in looking at comparing using the grid to going it on their own is the number of major disturbances and incidents per year. A lot of these are not caused by failures of the power generation system themselves, but it's failures of the transmission system. As the transmission system becomes less stretched over the countryside to provide to every single house and business in whatever location it may be, the ability to cut back on these numbers of failures is significantly enhanced. So, therefore, this becomes a much more reliable system for those that are still participating in it. We are currently in the early adoption phase of decentralized energy. We will see that through 2030 with 5 to 15% of independent generation. 2030 to 2040, we expect to see that rise to 30 to 45%. And then in 2040 up to 2050, we'll see 70 to 90% of independent generation. We do see major changes coming to large-scale generation sources. First, much greater increase in solar power. It's cheap once you build it, and it just sits there and runs. Second, we do see nuclear fission being utilized for much more of the power generation, fission as opposed to fusion. Third, we see fuel cells. The fuel cell research being done right now has been very successful, and we'll see that. And these three all will replace a lot of the fossil fuel driven sources that we are currently using. Some people will ask about generating electricity from hydroelectric power sources, in other words, flowing water. While this is certainly an inexpensive approach, it does require massive upfront investment, but the reality is we've used up most of the good sites for this, and it's unlikely that we'll see very many major projects in the future. The two largest factors that will drive huge growth in the requirements for electricity are transportation, as virtually all transportation will become electrically based, and the huge growth of the data centers required to process the information, which undermines the growth of the modern technologies. One of the probable solutions to the data center growth paradox that is currently under development is the use of satellite data centers. Satellites in space utilizing solar power and the fact that they are in space to cool the data center can do the processing in space and telecommunicate back and forth with ground sources, reducing the need for Earth-based data centers. This may seem pretty far-fetched, but as this slide shows, the planning stage for doing this is well underway right now. Expectation is in the 2030 to 2040 range, there will be early adoption and hybrid constellation about the initial use of space-based data centers. 2040 to 2050, we'll see a critical mass of this and the development of a resilient network. And at 2050 plus, full autonomy and a decentralized data exchange with 90% of the independent processing operating in the satellite range. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Life in 2046. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Life in 2046, and see the variety of topics that we're covering. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at lifein2046@gmail.com.